Let's look at the next category, what I call blue-collar shanks or metal shanks. The most common one is the household screwdriver. According to one study, the second most common cause of civilian homicides was the screwdriver. Now, unlike pens and pencils, the added resilience makes somebody confident enough to have both stabs to the body and possibly overhand thrusts. So you need to look at this carefully and design defenses ahead of time because it's twice as dangerous. You can attack both the high line and the low line, and the harder construction makes them very, very dangerous. In fact, many screwdrivers are made with tempered steel, better steel than a lot of knives are made out of. There's a reason why so many people are injured and killed by screwdrivers, and a lot of so-called self-defense instructors don't even realize what a high incident of violence with screwdrivers there are. Other common categories are the fourth, same idea. The metal construction makes the guy confident enough to attack the body, although in this case, probably the overhand attack is more likely. And of course, scissors is another common category that's ignored and is equally dangerous. Now, once again, we're going to use this big bright red trainer so you can see well on camera, but you have to imagine that this is a metal screwdriver or scissors. They're everywhere. It's easy to get a hold of. People and thugs can carry them without getting hassled by the cops because they're tools. They're considered tools, not weapons. Now, the real danger increases not only because of the penetrating power that a tempered steel screwdriver can do, but because of that stronger design, the attacker won't hesitate to go to the body too. So now you've got two distinct lines of attack that he could do. If he holds it like this, he's probably going to put it into you. And if he punctures a vital organ, you can go into shock, you're going to be in real trouble. So we looked at what happens if he's using the reverse grip. Now we're going to look at the stab. The stab is dangerous. It's got a lot of power behind it if you're using metal here. So we're going to again look at the standard Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu arsenal. There's a few of them and some are better than others, but the best one that's taught in almost every school is the idea of using two hands. So as he tries to thrust at me, I'm going to take a step like this to angle. So even if my hands don't do the job, hopefully that's going to miss me. Now the important thing is I want to be able to get two hands on there, either stiff arming it if I'm a little early and I want to make a barrier. As long as I keep my hands here, keep thrusting and pull it back. If he goes to the side, not straight thrust. It's going to be blocked by my forearms in this position. If he tries to go around the other way, it's really hard for him to hit you in this position. So I don't need to track the weapon so much. I need to block it here. If I'm a little later, I'm going to have to use a slapping motion because it's faster. It's not as strong necessarily, but it discombobulates that arm sometimes and I can get it there faster. I'm always aiming for the first two joints. Now the classical way that this is taught as a standard technique is if I'm able to get this grip, I then pull the guy off balance, step under him, and break the elbow here. Now, as a standard technique that you need a beginning, a middle, and an end so that you have a way to practice and do your reps, it's good. But I've been doing this technique for over 20 years and I don't think I've ever pulled it in a live speed, full speed simulation. So we've had to look at the problems with it. Okay? The main one is simply trying to do a lock here, trying to go right to that lock. It's not necessary. If I get this far, the most effective way is to go into this 2-on-1 that we talked about. This is a natural way and a more effective thing because it gives me way more options. So let's look at this hold again in detail. Now, through trial, error, and lots of training, we found that the best, simplest, and most effective way to control that arm is to control as many joints of it as possible. Remember, the body moves around its joints. So we have the wrist, the elbow, the shoulder, and the next joint down is the head. If I can control and influence them, I've got very good control. In this case, I've got my wrist, my hand on his wrist. My hand is up here near the shoulder where I can manipulate it, pulling it up and down to try and dysfunction the muscles. And my chest is controlling his elbow. Now don't forget, the same principle as in our 5 swords, I have to control his head. If I stay like this, he can not only headbutt me, he can put his head against mine, push my head away while jerking his arm out. Now keep your head, yeah, that gives him a lot of leverage. A lot of people understand this idea of 2-on-1 control either through training or intuitively, but they often leave out this key component. I need to have the last link in the chain to make this control as strong as possible. All right, in order to have optimal control, like I was talking about, I need to control as many of his joints as possible. I've got his wrist here, I've got his elbow against the center of my chest. I'm using this hand to manipulate his shoulder, and very importantly, at least when we're standing up, I need inside head control. Now, as he bends down, because I'm putting weight on his arm, it's not as necessary for me to have inside head. You don't need to follow the guy all the way down and start breaking your own balance, because at this point, he can't use his head on me. Now, if I've got the guy this far, it means I'm sagging on his elbow and putting pressure on that joint. If I can get him this far, I can put him in a very nasty elbow lock that's perfect for the street, because I don't need to go all the way on the ground. So at this point, I've got a good lock, and he's let go of the weapon already, but I want a optimal lock. Now at this point, I move my hand to my left and I let my chest go down, and this is one of the tightest elbow locks you're going to get, and I don't have to go all the way to the ground. I have more of a 180 or better field of vision. Now what's happening here is, yes, my chest is putting pressure on his elbow. That's the main thing. But by trapping his wrist here in the bend of my hip, it's very hard for him to escape, and it's very tight. Now the icing on the cake is that by doing this, I put more pressure on his elbow. I'm going to let it take the pressure off so I can talk, but remember, I want to be trying to turn his wrist like you're throttling the accelerator on your motorcycle. Now this hand I put on the ground, and as I walk it like this, I'm pushing his head away. As the head gets pushed away, you're stretching these muscles out, so they're all getting weaker and tighter, and you're putting excruciating pressure on the elbow. This is the kind of elbow lock that you can injure him to a degree and keep perfect control of him from a semi-standing position. All right, continuing on with metal shanks, we're talking about how we're using the standard Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu knife defense in this situation to solve the problem. Now, it's a good base to start with, but just like every other technique in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we need to pressure test it. Just like we do our sporting techniques against a live opponent who's really trying to resist us, at some point we need to do the same thing with our weapon defenses, and that's where I designed these. Now the classic one, when I go like this, I lose control and he begins to pull away. I have to slide both hands down to his wrist, and I do the classic big circle, and I can feed it into him or throw him with a shoulder lock. Once again, this is taught in a standard way. It's okay to have as a standard technique so that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you know when to stop and start the technique again. But once again, in live, full speed, high adrenaline situations, I don't think I've ever pulled this on anyone, and I was trying it for 10 years. The modification that we've come up with is just as simple and works a lot better, and we do it from the same 2-on-1 position. Now him yanking his arm out from here is more likely, especially if I haven't got him bent over and he's able to stand himself upright, and he starts to pull that arm out. Now instead of sliding to his wrist, I just put my head under, step, and I can drive on his shoulder here. At this moment, if I put my weight, I can drive him right down. He's going to let go of the weapon. So there's an underarm spin that makes a lot more sense, and I've been able to do many times both in competitive style no-gi grappling and against weapons, because it's done off of this much stronger Russian 2-on-1 position. So as he pulls and tries to pull his elbow out, look what he's doing. He's opening a hole here between his ribs and here. If I stay here, I probably am going to lose control. So I help him by raising that up. Bend your legs and put your head in. Now do you see how I've got him in a shoulder lock here, but I'm also using my head to prevent him from pulling his arm out backwards, and then I go through, and if I twist really hard, he's either going to get his shoulder blown out or he's going to fall forward. In either case, he's going to lose control of that, and I'm going to end up having disarmed him or in a dominant position. There's a more modern, realistic way to deal with him pulling back his arm after doing the double palm block. Let's look at the most important drill to develop good edge weapon defenses. In the end, if you can't control a 2-on-1, the rest of your defense is probably going to break down. So while this looks pretty simple, the most important thing to drill in the beginning is to be able to hold and maintain a 2-on-1, especially when you're not using your hands in the conventional way. I'm not gripping like this, I'm using it as a hook. Now this is a common grip here like we talked about on the wrist, but to drill it, you might want to use this grip, which is also common, and you'll see different times when this happens. But for the purpose of the drill, we particularly want to do it this way because we're not using our hands in the conventional way. And it's not difficult, but it takes a little bit of practice to understand that we're clamping and hooking and holding, not grabbing with our thumb and fingers, which is actually a lot weaker. So I'm underhooking here, and the same principle applies. This hand is controlling his wrist. I'm just not doing it conventionally. I'm using the edge of my arm and I'm trying to hook like this, and I put my elbow, his elbow, excuse me, in the center of my chest. Now he just tries to pull his arm out, and I learn to keep my balance while he's pulling around. Now, did you notice what I left out? Is getting that extra leverage by putting my head in. Now as he pulls, I can push him off balance. He tries to push into me, he's not getting past my head. So it's really important to just get used to being able to control a person this way and get good control. From here I can start taking him down. There's a conventional way to finish, and then we can switch and the next guy can begin.